Hello. In this film, we're going to talk about lighting for television. Lighting's a specialist craft, and it's not likely that producers would be asked to put lanterns into position or to know all the highly technical aspects which a lighting director must have at his fingertips. What producers should know, however, is the basic way in which a lighting director achieves his effects. If the problems of lighting are borne in mind at the planning stage of a production, studio rehearsals will go much more smoothly, because artists' moves, camera angles and boom positions will all be geared towards a well-lit show. First of all, then, let's take a detailed look at the way in which a straightforward close-up can be lit effectively. This is a relatively simple lighting job, but if you fully understand the basic principles involved and the terms used, you'll have a very good idea of the theory behind the most complex lighting situations. It would be difficult to show you exactly how I'm lit now, because, normally speaking, and for obvious reasons, lights are placed so that they will not be enshot. So we've designed a special miniature set. The relative position of each lantern and the effect it has on the subject to be lit is exactly the same as it would be in a full-scale set. Although it follows that because they're working so close to the subject, the lanterns aren't as large or powerful as they would otherwise be. Now, in the right foreground, you can see a small lighting console, by means of which the lighting director can switch on selected lanterns and control their intensity. In a good close-up, the features are clearly seen, particularly the eyes, and the subject is well separated from the background. Unless you're aiming for a particular effect, it's also important that the close-up should be a flattering one. All performers will be happier if they know they're looking their best on the screen. The first light to be selected is the key light. This is the strongest light used, and its position is determined largely by the effect you wish to create. Watch while we demonstrate different positions and the varying sculptural effects they'll have on Gillian, our model. First of all, a frontal key light, which might suggest direct sunshine. And now the key light moves rather more to one side. And now it moves further round. And now the key light moves so far round that it's almost behind Gillian. And we end up with this very dramatic shot. As you'll have noticed, the shot has become more and more dramatic or sculptural as the key light has moved further and further to the side. Which key light position shall we use to light our close-up? In a set representing a room, for instance, the key light direction must be predetermined by a window from which the light must appear to come. In a night scene, the main source of light might appear to be a practical lamp on the set. And, as we indicated earlier, a feeling of brilliant sunshine can be given by using a frontal key light. In the case of a close-up, without any of these governing factors, the key light is, quite simply, positioned to gain the most flattering results. Artistically, it's better to key a picture from the side rather than directly from the front. The picture gains modeling. It's not so flat. And incidentally, the problems of shadows cast by cameras and sound booms are not so great. So now we'll turn on our selected key light and this time pay particular attention to the angle at which the light falls, because this is very important. Here's our close-up, and you can see exactly what effect our chosen key light has. The picture is quite clear in terms of there being enough illumination. But look at those areas of heavy shadow on the side away from the light, particularly the nose shadow. And notice as well the lack of separation between Gillian and the background. What can be done to improve the picture? First, the heavy shadows can be counteracted by throwing a soft light called fill light, which controls the contrast created by the key light. Watch as we bring the fill light up, and you'll see its position in relation to our close-up camera and key light, close to the camera on the side away from the key light. This fill light isn't as strong as the key light. If it were, it would create a flat effect. It should be adjusted until it's just strong enough to soften the shadows and reveal the contour of the face and hair on the off-key side. Let's watch the effect on our close-up as we bring the fill light up to the right intensity, turn it off, and bring it up again. We now have a much better picture of Gillian. And there are no secondary shadows. This is because the fill light is positioned close to the camera. There's still room for improvement, though. Look at the lack of separation between Gillian's head, shoulders, and the background. To achieve this separation, we use another source of light from behind and above the subject. You turn it on, and you can see that it lights the top of the head and clearly separates Gillian from the background. Now the backlight's off again, and you can see the difference as it's turned on once more. Once again, the angle at which that light falls is very important. If the angle is too steep, as there, it'll cast unattractive shadows on the neck and chest. Perhaps you can see this more clearly without the key light. On the other hand, if the angle of the backlight is too shallow, the light will catch the lens of the camera and cause what is known as lens flare. While this single backlight would normally be enough for a male subject, an even better result can be obtained on a pretty young lady if we use two backlights, one on either side. Because these two will light the sides of her hair as well as the top of her head. Again, the two lights must be carefully positioned, because if they're too far round to the side, as they are now, you're going to get an ugly highlight on the nose, and particularly if Gillian turns her head, as she has now done. Let's just position our backlights correctly again and have another look at our close-up. See how the head now has a definite shape, completely distinguishable from the background, and how the hair has gained attractive highlights. Just to remind you, here's how the shot looked without backlight. And now with backlight, well, now you've seen exactly how to light a close-up of a pretty girl in the most flattering way. And you've also learnt the basic principles of what is known as three-point lighting. This is a slightly misleading term, as in the case of backlight, more than one light has been used, but they achieve a single function. Any still photographers will have realized that this three-point method of lighting is essentially the same as that used in taking portraits. The lighting is designed to take a picture from one specified angle. In television, however, it's often necessary to shoot the subject from more than one angle. If we were to take a profile shot of Gillian, using the camera you can see at the right of the picture, the result would be much more contrasty than our frontal shot. They don't match up at all well. In lighting for television, therefore, it's usually necessary to use a slightly more complex four-point technique, employing another fill light positioned to the side. The function of this fill light is to throw more light on the off-key side of the face. Here's our profile shot with the additional fill light. And you can see it now more nearly matches our frontal shot. The effect of this side fill light can be seen as it's switched on and off. It further enhances the shot because it gives us additional control over the off-key side of the face, as well as enabling us to match our profile shot. For now, Gillian is fully lit for a television situation. She can turn her head freely without spoiling the picture. And she can also be shot from various angles, and the close-ups will match one another. Next, we must give our attention to the background of the shot. It's important to realize that this should be lit independently. And for this reason, our model is 6 feet away from the backing. And this is a general rule. Never place an artist right up against the backing. Producers can help here by seeing that this difficult lighting situation does not arise. The use of a floor light, graduating the light on our background, will immediately enhance our picture. Notice the effect that the change of brightness on the background has on our picture as this floor light is varied in intensity. And the imaginative use of shadow patterns thrown by a simple projector will add further interest to a plain backing. The density of these shadows can be controlled by the use of the floor light. We've now established in some detail the principles of lighting a close-up for television. We've seen that by the choice of key light direction, with backlight and balancing out with fill light, we can create almost any atmosphere we wish. So you can see the flexibility of the four-point method of lighting and the degree of control that the lighting director has over the picture. Exactly the same principles apply under normal studio conditions as in our miniature set. Here am I about to be lit by normal studio lighting. First of all, the key light, then the camera fill light, the backlight, the side fill light, and the background. I expect you're aware how extremely important it is that your production should be well lit. There are many ways in which producers can help the lighting director to achieve this. Take lighting into consideration when you're planning moves for artists and cameras. Remember that in television, a subject is lit according to the direction in which he's going to face. So don't let your artist make unscheduled moves. You can't really blame the lighting director if you can't see me properly. I mean, I wasn't supposed to get up and stroll around the studio like that. It may be very tempting to snatch unplanned camera shots, but there's a very great likelihood that such shots won't match the planned ones and will involve the lighting director in a time-wasting major relight. The position of the sound boom must also be thought about in relation to lighting. Watch what happens when a boom works on the same side of the set as the key light. Yes, that's the boom you can see there on the left that came in. Inevitably, it'll come between the key light and the subject, causing ugly shadows. Use the boom on the other side of the set, the one we've been using all the time, and the shadows are all avoided. Good lighting is dependent on these and many other physical factors. And once again, we come back to the need for pre-planning every possible aspect of your production. Perhaps the necessity of working as part of a team rather than in isolation when you're engaged in any television production is even more vital in the case of lighting than at any other time. Remember, let your lighting director know in advance exactly where your artists and action are going to be at any given moment during the production, and your exact camera and boom positions. Only make alterations with extreme caution, because even small deviations can result in very ugly shots and spoil the flow and effectiveness of your program. Another thing that producers must know about is something called the grayscale, which we can illustrate by means of this chart. You'll see that each of these colored squares registers as a shade of gray, varying from light to dark. The tone of his distinct case. But if the camera crabs along to darker tones, it's unable to register any differences, unless the exposure is increased. That's to say, the iris is opened, when the darker tones will register distinctly. If we now crab back to the lighter tones, with the camera still opened up, you'll see that these in their turn are indistinguishable. If we stop down far enough to be able to see the differences in the light tones, the dark tones become indistinguishable. So we've demonstrated that normally we must confine our range of tones if we're to see detail in all areas of a picture. When we showed you the color chart, it was flat lit. That is, the same amount of light was falling on all parts of the card. In television, this type of flat lighting is rarely used because it provides the most uninteresting pictures. Good lighting, as you saw earlier, is a matter of creating light and shade. And by doing this, we increase the contrast already present in the scene. Let's go back to the color chart. And you'll see that if we light one half to a higher level than the other, we increase the contrast and lose detail at one or other end of the scale. Here, the additional light has overexposed the light colors, whilst leaving us still distinguishable. We may compensate for the overexposure of the light areas by stopping the camera down. But by doing so, of course, we have now lost detail in the dark areas. This factor of lighting for television, the deliberate creation of light and shade, further limits the range of tones that can effectively be used. Producers must remember that this range of tones must be related primarily to skin tones, because faces are so often the most important thing we want to show. And whether these skin tones are light or dark, they should register accurately within the grayscale. And you'll notice that they should be neither the lightest nor the darkest tone employed. Let's take a look at some practical applications. Ken's skin tone is very dark, and he's wearing a white shirt. If we adjust the exposure to see his face clearly, his shirt is overexposed. If we stop down to accommodate his clothes, we lose detail in his face. Here's a similar application where the problem is reversed. Gillian's a blonde. Her skin tone is exceptionally light. Here she's wearing a lacy black dress. If the exposure is adjusted to see her face properly, the dress looks dull and heavy. And if we now want to see the detail in the dress and open up to do so, her face is overexposed and burnt out. So the color of the clothing must be related to the skin tone, because it's the skin tone which will determine the exposure if we're to see faces clearly, as we must. Let's take another look at Ken. Now he's wearing a mid-tone suit which contrasts well with his shirt and tie that he's chosen, though these aren't too light either. And though the effect is still fairly light, we've resolved all the tones in the picture. That is, we can see all the details clearly in both the darker and lighter areas. We're working within an acceptable contrast range. Gillian's changed her dress too, and this time it's emerald green, which registers as a fairly dark mid-tone. Once again, we've an interesting picture with plenty of contrast, and we've resolved all the tones in the picture. Everything I've said about balancing the grayscale in relation to skin tones and clothing applies equally to sets and props. And here again, it's up to the producer to inform the designer exactly what he wants to show on the screen and the atmosphere he'd like to create. And then the designer, too, can play his part in ensuring a well-lit show. If you're in any doubt about the balance of skin tones with the color of clothes or setting, it's a good idea to try and have a look at them in front of cameras in advance, so that any adjustments can be made and you won't lose precious time during your all-too-short camera rehearsal. So far in this program, we've talked in some detail about how to light a close-up for television, and we've mentioned some of the ways in which a producer can help his lighting director. You'll have realized that there's an enormous amount we haven't talked about. Lighting for television is a very, very complex craft, and it would be impossible to try and break down the exact techniques involved in lighting every possible situation. As we said earlier, producers are directly concerned only with the basic principles and the practical applications that affect them. But they should also be aware of exactly how much lighting can do to establish mood and atmosphere in their programs. So sit back and watch while we transfer you to a Spanish courtyard setting. Well, it's a Spanish courtyard, all right, but it looks pretty dull, doesn't it? Television pictures are two-dimensional, so even though the set has been built in 3 dimensions, it needs lighting to produce an illusion of the 3rd dimension, to give the set depth. This illusion is given by casting shadows. And so, paradoxically, it may be said that the art of lighting is the art of casting shadows. The area and density of these shadows is all important. Here, they're of minimum area and density. We have established what is known as a high-key scene. Not only does lighting give a scene depth, it also establishes the time of day, mood, and atmosphere. At the flick of a switch, we know that it's a brilliant summer's day. We have an illusion of hot sun, with shadows lurking in the archways. Tranquility and a sense of timelessness. silence, except for the splash of the fountain and the ceaseless hum of the cicadas. Our own imagination begins to take us further. It's siesta time, the whole world sleeping, or almost the whole world. These two must be on holiday, not used to siesta. The long, hot afternoon wears on, and soon it will be evening. Well, there it is. The illusion's gone. No more music, no more moonlight. We're back on a television set in a television studio. We hope you enjoyed the entertainment and also realized just how much lighting can do to create atmosphere, environment, and mood. In television, it's hard to know where substance ends and illusion begins. And lighting is the very substance of illusion. It works for you. It lifts ordinary, everyday fabric of a studio into something that will enchant the eye, catch the imagination, and hold the interest. And this surely is the aim of any television production.